There's a special kind of thrill in standing under a thundercloud while your inner monologue just spirals out of control. You're tiny, the sky is furious, and your soul, which you previously thought was doing okay, is suddenly composing a sonnet about lost love and the futility of ambition. That's romanticism. Not the Netflix and candlelight kind. Not Jane Austen matchmaking in a drawing room. This is romanticism with a capital R. A poetic uprising that worshipped nature, embraced emotion, and told Enlightenment thinkers to take their logic and shove it. It's the moment you look at a mountain and feel seen. The chill that creeps in when the wind rustles through the trees just right. The sudden, irrational need to walk into the forest and never come back. Romanticism didn't just want to describe the world, it wanted to feel it deeply, painfully, and gloriously. What even is romanticism? Let's call it what it was, a vibe rebellion. To understand romanticism, you have to understand what it was reacting against. The 18th century, which was also known as the Age of Enlightenment, was all about reason, rationalism, scientific progress, big wigs, big systems, and an even bigger obsession with control. But what if your soul doesn't fit into a spreadsheet? Romanticism kicked the door open in the late 1700s and shouted, "I don't want to explain the world, I want to ache in it." At its core, Romanticism was a philosophical, artistic, and spiritual rebellion, a refusal to flatten the human experience into formulas and polite conversation. The Romantics weren't anti-intellect, they were anti-dead inside. They said things like, what if we let our feelings do the talking? What if the natural world is actually divine? What if our pain is valid and beautiful and maybe also the subject of a 14-stanza lyric poem? Romanticism was less of a checklist and more of a mood. And that mood was thunderclouds, longing, and the smell of damp earth. You know that moment when you're standing in a quiet forest and suddenly the world feels big and ancient and kind of holy? The Romantics would have written entire books about that. To them, nature wasn't just scenery, it was alive. It was the closest thing they had to God, or at least to truth. William Wordsworth is basically the poster child for this. He believed that the natural world could heal you, shape you, and teach you things no professor ever could. His work, Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, is one long, breathless meditation on memory, presence, and how a walk through the woods is sometimes more sacred than church. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. That's not metaphor, that's a belief system. Samuel Taylor Coleridge, on the other hand, took nature and twisted it into something surreal and haunting. In The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the ocean becomes a character, terrifying, sentient, almost vengeful. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. It's not just about a guy stuck on a boat, it's about guilt, redemption, and the cosmic weight of screwing with the natural order. Romantics saw landscapes as spiritual texts. They weren't describing trees, they were interpreting the divine. Romanticism is what happens when you put big brains and bigger feelings into bodies that are extremely bad at self-regulation. These poets didn't just write about heartbreak, they lived it, sometimes recreationally. Lord Byron was sort of the original sad boy with swagger. He cultivated mystery like it was a second career. His poetry swings between sensuality and despair, and in She Walks in Beauty, he basically turns a woman into a celestial event. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. It's romantic, lowercase r, but it's also deeply romantic. Nature, beauty, awe, and that slight existential ache that you can't explain but totally feel. Then there's Percy Bysshe Shelley, who wasn't content to write love poems, he wrote revolution into his verses. His Ode to the West Wind is half eulogy, half rallying cry. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? This isn't just seasonal optimism. It's a metaphor for political upheaval, personal transformation, and the wild hope that change is inevitable even when the world feels kind of frozen solid. And John Keats, sweet doomed Keats. The guy couldn't cough without the universe plotting his funeral. And yet he still gave us some of the most luminous poetry in English literature. Into Autumn, he watches the seasons shift and somehow makes it feel like a soft goodbye. Season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. He knew he was dying. He saw the rot in everything, and he still chose to find beauty in the decay. Romantics didn't edit out the pain. They leaned in. They asked, what if suffering has something to teach us? What if beauty and sorrow aren't enemies, but siblings? Romantic poets weren't just scribbling feelings into verse. They were overthrowing an entire literary regime. Pre-Romantic poetry was all about structure. Think balance, symmetry, high society themes, a lot of references to Greek gods and virtue. The Romantics saw that and went, cool story, bro. Now let me write a sonnet about my soul unraveling in a thunderstorm. They changed everything. They ditched heroic couplets for looser forms. They swapped noblemen and battlefields for farmers, wanderers, wild landscapes. They made inner life, the personal, the emotional, the unruly, the heart of the poem. Even their approach to rhyme and rhythm reflected this. Romantic poetry is full of sudden turns, strange metaphors, and long, winding lines that sound more like speech than song. And it worked because it felt real. Take Wordsworth's The Prelude, a massive autobiographical poem about his inner life. He didn't write about wars or kings. He wrote about ice skating as a child and how that moment made him feel connected to something vast and unknowable. In Shelley's England in 1819, a brutal takedown of the British monarchy that still manages to sound like a prayer, an old, mad, blind, despised, and dying king. Romanticism gave poets the tools to protest, to reflect, to grieve, to love, and to dream, all without pretending to be fine. Romanticism didn't end, it just shape-shifted. You see it in music and indie films, in photo captions about loneliness and moonlight. In every artist who's ever said, I don't know what this is, but I felt something, and now I need to make something. Romanticism reminds us that being emotional isn't indulgent. It's human. That there's no shame in awe. There's no weakness in grief. that beauty still matters, even when it's fragile, even when it's fleeting, and especially when it hurts. We live in a world that loves irony, that scoffs at sincerity, that tells you to be cool and detached and never feel too much. Romanticism says, screw that. Cry if you need to. Climb a mountain and yell at the sky. Write poems about heartbreak. Marvel at the stars. Burn something. Because deep down, you know this. The sublime lives in the crack between your ribs. And sometimes the only way to survive the world is to feel it harder. You don't have to be a poet to be a romantic. You just have to feel something real and not apologize for it. That's the invention Romanticism gave us, and honestly, it still stands. So whether you're watching the rain slide down your window or listening to music that makes your chest ache, know this, you're not alone. Byron was there, Shelley was there, Keats was definitely there, probably journaling about it. This has been Perfectly Poetic. And if you've ever cried at a sunset or written a journal entry that got a little too existential, congratulations. You're exactly where you're supposed to be.